folks that are trying to do the right thing. Now, here's the deal. I don't know how many guys had a great week this week. I mean, it was a great week. Come on. All right. I heard productive. Okay. Yeah. Good. We're here. Okay. How many guys had it was okay week, right? It was okay. Okay. How many guys had man, I'm just glad to have made it to Sunday kind of week, right? All right, we're not there. Okay. So here's the thing. No matter whatever kind of week you had, whether it was one of the best weeks you've seen in a long, long time, middle of the road, or it's a challenge, you're here today. Yeah. And I believe that God has something for each and every one of us this morning. Amen. And I hope that you will find and you will hear that the words will speak to your heart in a special way today. That from the fellowship to the preaching of God's word to maybe a sidebar conversation, right? There's something that many things will really meet your needs today. Amen. And you know what's so great about how we're meeting here today is it so reminds me of how they did in the first century. So everybody go to Acts chapter 2. Come on. Get us going today. And we have a special treat that I don't want to tell you the special, super duper treat we have this morning. And so who's going to be preaching the word? Some of us already know. Yeah, but we're going to unravel and reveal. We're going to reveal that in a moment. But in Acts chapter 2, of course, it's the book of Acts, right? The acts of the first century Christians, the acts or action of the early believers there in the first century. And in verse 42, it lays out really, I've read the scripture for a long, long time. I've been a disciple for many years, but it means slightly now in this chapter of my walk with God, it just rings differently to me because we're literally doing this, I believe. So, of course, this is doing it during the time of Pentecost. But it says, verse 42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship. Come on. To the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe. 42. Verse 42. Yeah. 42. Acts 2, 42. Let me back it up, y'all. Everybody, everybody on deck? We can back it up. We can read God's word again. It's all good. So they devote themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and miraculous signs were done by the apostles. All the believers were together, come on, and had everything in common. Amen. Selling their possessions and goods. So if you need anything, Ali will sell some. He'll give you whatever you need today. He'll need, I'm going to sell my truck. Who needs some? Come on. But seriously, but our hearts are, we do what we got to do to help each other. You with me on this? Yep. And we sacrifice for each other. That's what this is all about. Mm-hmm. But it goes on to say, every day they continue to meet together in the temple courts. Look, watch this. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Isn't it wonderful just to see the scripture fulfilled in your own viewing? And in so many ways, we are, of course, that was a very special time in the history in God's history. But this is, today we're in our homes, we're breaking bread, we're certainly enjoying the sweet fellowship, and we certainly are devoted to the apostles' teaching. And we're going to hear an incredible young, powerful man of God bring that to us today. Noah Ellington will be preaching the word today. Noah. He ready. He ready. So if you wonder whether I Noah was ready, you know he's ready. But we want to right before that. Welcome. Good morning. Right before we do that, we're going to open up in a word of prayer. We're going to pray. Praise God, blessing on this. So with that, I'm asked Ali to come on up. He's going to open up in a word of prayer. And I would say this, seriously though, in all sincerity, wherever you may be this morning, and we may be at different places, my hope and prayer is that God will speak to you, that your heart will be encouraged, that you'll be uplifted, you'll be inspired, and perhaps even moved to make some even additional decisions that can draw you even closer to our Heavenly Father. Amen. So with that, Ali, come on up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
we'll actually ask if he could open up a prayer.
Oh, he's good. Okay. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on that note, give it up for Noah. Come on, Noah. Come on down.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Hope you guys are all doing good this morning.
Yes.
So I wanted to request a little in prayer. I want to pray for a couple things in particular, so that everyone can bow their heads with me, and we can do this prayer. Okay. Father in heaven, God, thank you so much for this opportunity we have to come together in fellowship. I pray that you're with me, God, and help me to speak intelligently and with confidence. I pray that any joke I make, they laugh. Even though my friends, like Dylan, has told me I'm not funny. God, I pray that you're with us and just help the Spirit move in this household today, God. We love you, Father. In Yeshua's name I pray. And we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, kind of want to start off with a little intro about how I came to do this sermon and an example from my life that ties into our message. So my dad came to me and he said, "Son, I want you to do the sermon for Sunday." And this is not the first time he's come with me with this request, and I responded like I have been the last few times is, I'm not feeling it, Dad. And he came back with more pros and cons, and as I responded with my reservations, he listed more pros and cons. More benefits and pros, I'm sorry. And as he was speaking, I realized that, wow, my dad really has my best interest at heart. He plans stuff for me, and he tends for it to be good. You know, he intends for me to benefit from it. And as I thought back of what I could, speak about during the summer, and I thought, like, what is my son's adventurous, intense years on earth taught me? That's all. And it just taught me that not everyone likes me. You know, not every girl likes me. Not every teacher, not every teacher at school likes me. Some people, surprise, surprise, actually dislike me. So some people intend to do harm for me. Some people, in pursuit of their own agenda, harm me unintentionally, or they just don't consider how their actions may affect me. Which brings me to my example in my life. I had a basketball coach my freshman and sophomore year who didn't really like me. We didn't really get along. I don't know what I did, but I was kind of low on the totem pole of players he liked. And he would do things like yell at me. I felt like he humiliated me. He would yell in the middle of my game, "I don't want to ever see you bring the ball up court," and things like that. I felt like what he was doing intended to harm me. He intended to try to break my spirit and have me submit to him. And as I realized going through it, that God was actually using him in my life to instill some convictions in me of how a leader should make the people who he leads feel, what is acceptable and what's not. And he's helped build character in me, teaching me when to stand up for myself or when to walk away from a situation when it's not beneficial. So, this kind of ties into, so the point of bringing this up is without him, I wouldn't be the person I am today. It ties into the message, the theme of this Bible study. With others may intend for harm, God intends for good.
Yes.
So, first example in the Bible I want to use is Joseph and his life. And for those people who are not familiar with his life, Here's some highlights. Now Joseph was taken from his mom and dad, and he never saw his mom again. He was kidnapped and sold into slavery by his own brothers. He was wrongly accused of attempting to commit adultery with Potiphar's wife, which was an official of Pharaoh's. Then he was thrown into prison for over 2 years. So let's recap. Taken from his parents, never see his mom again. Kidnapped by his brothers, sold into slavery, wrongly accused of trying to bed Potiphar's wife, and thrown into prison for more than 2 years. That's rough. That's tough. Yeah. So he got out of prison, do some powerful stuff. Don't want to go into all the details right now, but got out of prison. And after he got out of prison, God moved. He trusted in God, and God moved. So let's read what happened to Joseph. Let's go to Genesis chapter 44.
No.
I'm sorry. Let's go to Genesis chapter 41.
All right. Come on, we're with you, brother.
Actually, guys, I'm tricky. Genesis chapter 41, verse 39. That's right.
All right, 41, 39.
Keeping you guys here too. So, to give you a little context, Pharaoh had a dream that was really troubling him. And he brought out many magicians, he brought out many interpreters to try to help him figure out what this dream's about. No one in the land could do it. Joseph had a gift. He was brought out of prison to interpret his dream. And he did so successfully. Straight out of prison now. And basically there was going to be a famine in the land, and the Pharaoh needed someone to store the food while the land was still prosperous, and deliver it and distribute it to people throughout the land when the famine hit. So we're going to go to verse 39. Chapter 41, verse 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." 41. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and men shouted out before him, "Make way." Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all of Egypt." Stop there. This man just got out of jail. He just got out of jail, and Pharaoh was like, "I'm dress him in my finest clothes, give him a chariot, and give him all this authority." So we see him go from the bottom to the top very quickly, very quickly. We're gonna go to 41 verse chapter 41 verse 51 and 52. So 41 verse 51. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, "It is because of God has made me forget all my trouble in all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." To remind you what happened, he went from being a slave, taken from his family, being a slave, through all this hardship that God brought him up to a place of authority. And he said that God has made me forget all my trouble. God has made me fruitful in this land that I was suffering in. What people may intend for harm, God intends for good, yeah?
Yes.
So, fast forwarding a little bit. The famine reached not only Egypt, but the land of Canaan too. And that's where his brothers were at that sold him into slavery. They had to come to Egypt to get food. And since he was in charge of distributing the food, they had to basically go through him. So they had a little reunion. Very. So when I want to go to Genesis 45, fast forwarding a little, and I want to focus on verse 7 and 8. Now in this section, Joseph makes himself known to his brothers who sold him into slavery and did all his wrong. All this wrong. He never saw his mom again. There has to be some bitterness there, you would think. Right? Well, let's see. Verse 7 and 8. Chapter 45. But God sent me ahead of you. This is his conclusion. This is what he said. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and save your lives by great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household and ruler of Egypt. I think this is very powerful. Here his brothers sold him into slavery, and he said, it wasn't you, it was God. God sent me before you so I may save you and the rest of our family. So then it was not you who sent me, but God, right? If it wasn't for God sending, see, the thing about God, what's cool about God is he knows all things, right? I think that's pretty cool. See, like, I have a lot of superpowers. I don't know if you guys know. I'm a superhero. But yeah. So, like, that includes, like, flying, super speed, crazy handles on the basketball court. But one of the powers I do not have is I can't tell the future. It's one of the ones I didn't get. But God knows, right? So, when I'm ever in a spot, I'm like, God, I don't know how this is going to work out. I know he's going to work it out. Right? I may not know how, but I know he will. Okay? So, Joseph didn't know how it would work out, but it happened. Okay? He said that God had God used you to send me to Egypt, so that I may become this to Pharaoh, so that I may come back, give our whole entire family food, and save the lives of Israel and all his children.
Well.
So I want to point out a few things. During this hard time, I want to point out how Joseph waited on God. He had opportunities, if you read this very closely. When he told Pharaoh his dream, he could have said, make me in charge, Pharaoh, I'm the one. But no, he waited and watched God move. And Pharaoh said, no, you're the one. He didn't ask for it. He waited till God moved. He didn't self-promote. He was quiet and watched God work. Last thing I want to do in Genesis is chapter 50, 15 through 20, before we move on. Now, to give you some more context, at this time, Joseph ended up having a great family reunion with his family. Told him, go get my younger brother, go get my dad, go get all your children, bring them here, I got you, basically, right? I'm running things in Egypt, I got you, I'll give you land, I'll take care of you, right? And then his father...
They're like, what?
I know, they got the book.
What's the cat?
So, his father ended up passing away. And when his father ended up passing away, his brothers were scared. Like, this guy is going to lose it. He's been like holding back his bitterness for dad's sake, but now dad's gone. Now we're really going to get it, right? We're really going to get it. So they were. I mean, it was real. Egypt, like give me them heads. Like he could have done that at any time. He had people under him, and he had the authority to take them out if he wanted to. So let's go to chapter 15. You're gonna hear some familiar things. When Joseph, is everyone there?
Yes.
Okay. 50:15. Okay. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did him? So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers and the sins and wrongs they have committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of God and your father. When their message came to Joseph, he wept. Joseph was with his dad when he died. He knew that they were lying. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Again, he reassures them, what you intended for harm, God intended for good. Look, guys, he was using you so that I may save our lives and the lives of our family. We're going to move on to the classic story of David and Goliath, my childhood favorite. That we're going to go to Samuel 1, chapter 17.
First Samuel.
First Samuel.
17.
Chapter 17. So, those who don't know the story of David and Goliath, you should. You're kind of lame if you don't. It's an awesome story. But those who don't, here's some context. Okay, so the Israelites and the Philistines were at war. They were on one hill. The Israelites were on one hill. Philistines were on another, a valley between them. 9-foot tall man, Goliath, would go out each day, every morning and evening. The Philistines would stand there, and he would go out and taunt the Israelites. Right? He's 9 feet tall. He had armor that weighed 125 pounds. Like, that was his armor. Like, that's like my weight. Like, that's his armor. And big guy defied Israel's army. He didn't care. What are they going to do? He challenged them. They wouldn't send a warrior out to face him, right? David, who were just at the campsite because he was supposed to be delivering his brother some food, saw Goliath mocking Israel's army, mocking God's army. Didn't really sit right with David. David's a boy now. Keep in mind. So. Okay, so I want to start in verse 32. And this is after David hearing Goliath taunt Israel's army. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 32. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you're not able to go against the Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy. And he has been fighting man from his youth. This man's a trained warrior. Not to mention he's 9 feet tall. And you're just a boy. You can't go fight him. 34. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. I'm a sheep shepherd. That guy has nothing on me. Continuing. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. And stop there. David's saying, I've been dealing with wild animals. I kill lions and bears. This Philistine is nothing. Right? He goes on, verse 36. Your servant has killed both lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord will be with you." Right? I'm going to stop there. Right now we see David's mindset. This man is defying Israel's army, God's army. I'm not going to let our army go out like that. I'm not going to let him disrespect God. God will deliver me just as the lion and the bear. I'm going to bring it into the theme now. Verse 41. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked at David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." I think it's safe to say that Goliath's goal was he wanted to harm David. Okay. Right. So he said, "I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." He wanted to crush him. He despised him. He cursed him. He wanted to harm him. God had other plans. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I'll give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by my sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. Goliath died. Long story short, Israelites won the army. Yes, sir. Wow. In verse 58, if you flip the page, Saul says, "Whose son are you, young man?" Saul asked. David said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." In 18, verse 1, after David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. We're going to skip down to verse 5. Whatever Saul sent him to do, David did it successfully. Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the people of Saul's officers as well. Here's the thing. Here we had Goliath, who hated David, who wanted to harm him. God had other plans. God used Goliath as an obstacle so David can overcome him. And when he did, it opened the door for David to have this conversation with Saul, for Saul to bring David under his wing, for David to have a lifetime friendship with Jonathan, and for him to have a leading role in the military. This led him on the path to becoming king. He used Goliath to help fulfill his promise he made when David was really young. If we go to 2 Samuel 5, we see what happens to David. 2 Samuel 5, verse 1. Section is called David Becomes King of Israel. Spoiler. Okay. All the tribes of Israel came to David of Hebron and said, We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. When all the elders of Israel had come to King David of Hebron, the king made a compact with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed King David over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king and reigned for 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Israel, he reigned over all of Israel and all of Judah for 33 years. Here we see David, who was at the battle with Goliath, and Goliath wanted to kill him. We see a couple years later, maybe a decade later or so, he's becoming king of all of Israel. When people may intend for harm, see, that backfired on Goliath. Goliath wanted him dead, not king of Israel.
Right.
When people may intend for harm, God intends for good. God delivered David, like he did from the lion and the bear. He delivered Goliath to help fulfill his promise to put David on the path of receiving the throne. The thing I wanted to point out about David, which I found very interesting, is we're not going to turn to it, but in 1 Samuel 18 it says, in everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. I found this very interesting because when I read about Joseph's life in Genesis 39 verse 2, it says, the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did. With David and everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. With Joseph, the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served as Egypt's slave. These men were humble and revered God, and God blessed them with everything they did. Everything they did, they were successful. God was with them. Whatever circumstance, whatever challenge that came, they became successful. Joseph was a slave, but he was promoted into being one of the highest slaves. He was in prison, but he got authority in the prison over all the prisoners. He became an interpreter of dreams for Pharaoh, and he ended up receiving command and authority over all of Egypt. David had challenge after challenge after challenge. Goliath, Saul, Philistines, all these armies who want to kill them. He was known as a slayer of tens of thousands. He was considered unstoppable.
Yeah.
If we follow in these men's footsteps, if we're humble and revere God, and that we live for God, and if we live for God and seek Him, these things will apply to us. God says, Christ says in John 10:10, I am the gate. He says in John 10 verse 7, very truly I tell you, I am the gate. To verse 10 he says, the thief comes only to steal and destroy, and I have come so that we may have life and have it to the full. We enter through Christ, we will not only have life in abundance, but we will have it in full. Life in abundance means that God will be with us with everything we do. Joseph had life in abundance. David had life in abundance. In Romans 8, this will also apply to us if we decide to follow God, our choice. And Romans 8, verse 28, we don't have to go to it. I have it here. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. We decide to pursue God's purpose and not our own. Joseph did not promote himself. David said, it's not by my sword, but this is the Lord's battle. If we do things for the Lord and not to promote ourselves, that God will work out all the things in our lives for us, right? God knows the future. He plans. He would take care of us. Also, a point is when we recognize who a person is, like in my life, with my coach situation, I recognized who the coach was. Mm-hmm. It's our responsibility to respond godly, right? I didn't quit. I could have quit basketball. I could have badmouthed them to all the players. I could have started an anti-coach website. That wasn't the right response. Joseph didn't do that. He didn't kill his brothers, right? Joseph recognized that God was using them to help him out, right? I realized that God was using my coach to help make me a better person, right? When we realize who someone is, it's our responsibility to act accordingly, right? Last scripture, Jeremiah 29, verse 11. I want to go. We can go to this one. Jeremiah 29, verse 11. Yes. Okay. God's superpower right here. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. God knows the plans He has for us. We don't have to know how things are going to work out. We just have to trust and know that He knows how things are going to work out. If we seek Him first, and our main goal is to honor Him, He'll take care of our future. This is what He promises. That's called faith. We're sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. We don't see Christ walking around the streets in the flesh anymore. But we know He's with us every day. When Christ came back to life and Thomas doubted, he saw and he believed. He didn't believe He resurrected. He actually had to felt Him and was like, oh, I believe, right? Christ says, blessed are those who don't believe, who don't see, and still believe. That's what I want to close out with. Blessed are those who don't see and still believe. My message here today is to trust in God and not to question Him when we go through hard times, but to try to recognize how He's using this obstacle in our life to benefit us. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Thank you guys. I think my dad's going to come up. Oh, Mr. Hall.
Amen. That was awesome. Thank you, Noah. Appreciate that, brother. Definitely, if you didn't get an opportunity to take notes, you can see Noah for some of the scriptures if you'd like to just reflect on your own lives. I think when we see and observe some of the stories of faithful individuals who really utilize God's power, we need to question ourselves as far as where we stand. Where are we in our lives? Are there situations that we're going through and we kind of feel like, man, is God against me? You know, what's going on here? You know, should I retaliate? Do I need to protect myself? Do I need to advocate for myself? Or is God teaching me a lesson through this? I think, and it's always well, a lot of times, even if you read these stories, you know, David, and just all that he went through. I mean, there was a time where he was just, you know, living in caves and he was running from Saul and really trying to identify, man, what is God's plan here? You know, am I supposed to die? Does it end here? You know, Joseph, when he was going through, you know, there was a moment where, you know, his brothers actually sold him. You know, and when you think about that, how is your brother going to sell you? It's like we dislike this guy so much that we just need to eliminate him. You know? And he was looked at, even David being the shepherd. Now, this is the thing with Joseph, with the Egyptians, they wouldn't even allow an Egyptian to sit at the same table to eat with them. That's how low they looked down on them. So it wasn't just like, oh man, you know, he was a criminal and, you know, he found favor, you know what I'm saying, in Pharaoh, and they were like, okay, man, you're ruling everything. Everyone just accepted him. I'm sure they were still snickering. What? How have this guy over us. He's your number two? Right. What's going on with this guy? So there's situations that we may be in, where people may not have confidence in us. They may feel like someone made a wrong decision. And it may even be their purpose to tear you down and prove that you are not the one. I remember a situation. I worked for LA Times for 15 years. And when I first went into management, one of the other managers, I was kind of shadowing some of the other managers. And there were probably over 300 employees at the time, this automated dialer and things of that nature. So this manager stopped the system and walked out of the building. So everyone, they were taking calls. They're at a computer taking calls, doing customer service and things like that. And they're like, we're not getting any calls. They're up in an uproar, like 300 individuals like, man, they were commission driven. So they were like, man, you are affecting my money. I have to take care. I have my bills and things of that nature. So I'm a new manager. I'm just like, oh my God, what do I do? So I sat in the moment and said, Lord, I need you right now. Right? Because they're looking at me with these evil looks and things. I'm like, man. So something says, go look at the system. And I looked at the system and saw it was paused. I said, wow, how did that happen? Re-engaged the system. And I talked to this manager and I said, dude, the system just stopped all of a sudden. I'm pure heart, like, oh man, he's my mentor. He's looking out after me. And he said, yeah, I know that. He said, man, my goal is to make you look bad.
Wow.
He said that to me directly. He said, I'm going to do everything in my power to tear you down.
Wow.
So, of course, I know I told a couple of you guys I'm from Compton, so first I was in a situation, I said, man, do I take it to the streets? Oh, you want it? Okay, I know. I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with that, right? But then something said, dude, you a Christian. How you going to share the gospel with him if you set this brother up for, Yeah. And I was like, wow, what do I do in this situation? So I loved him. I would share things with him, have conversations with him, ask him how he's doing. And he just noticed, that my heart was genuine. And I actually won him over. He cried in front of me at one time, And so in situations, that are really difficult like that, that's the thing that we always want to reflect on. What is God trying to teach me in this situation? What stance do I take here? So that the Lord can really move. The thing that made each of these individuals successful is they submitted to God. They're like, man, I know you have a better plan. Things look really bad right now. But I know you have a plan. And we have to step back in our situations that we're going through and really look for the Lord. In Corinthians it says that, no temptation has seized us but what is common to man. And he says that he will provide a way out for us. So in all these really difficult, these challenging situations that we're in, look for the Lord. There's that opportunity. There's that opening that he has. You may see this huge problem just succumbing you, just overcoming you, just overwhelmed with it. Man, where is the Lord in this situation so that we can lean on God for that success? Amen. Once again, thank you, Noah. Come on. Awesome. So that concludes our service. I don't know if we have any announcements or what'd you say? Okay, yep. Definitely. Definitely. Amen. So let's go ahead and stand and we can sing a song. So we're gonna actually a more softer, kind of slower song. If I don't get to heaven. So the words is just, if I don't get to heaven, it'll be nobody's fault but mine. Well, so and it's pretty easy to catch on. I'll throw some words out for you, man. If I don't And you know what, the sisters will actually echo us. Okay, so the guys, if I don't,
Okay.
and the sisters, if I don't
Gotcha.
get to heaven, get to heaven.
Gotcha.
All right, so a couple of sisters know that part. So you guys help us out. Okay, here we go. Amen. Here we go. If I don't get to heaven, if I don't get to heaven, well, if I don't get to heaven, dear Lord, it'll be nobody's fault. We're gonna sing that one more time. Well, if I don't get to heaven, if I don't get to heaven, all of us. Well, if I don't get to heaven, dear Lord, it'll be nobody's fault but mine. If I don't stay faithful, if I don't stay faithful, if I don't stay faithful, dear Lord, it'll be nobody's fault but mine. If I don't love the Lord, if I don't love the Lord, well, if I don't love the Lord, dear Lord, it'll be nobody's fault. If I don't read my Bible, come on now. If I don't read my Bible, well, if I don't read my Bible, dear Lord, it'll be nobody's. One more time, here we go. I say it'll be nobody's fault. Sorry, we go. I say it'll be nobody's fault but mine. Come on. Amen.